The third, and most probably the strongest argument, touches upon a theological issue involving the tension between Hashgacha Pratit, God's involvement in the events of mankind, and the free will, the Bechira Chavshit, and man's accountability for those events and actions for which he has been involved. For example, Yosef received 2 visions. These visions were actually prophecies regarding Yosef vis-a-vis the rest of the family. Namely, rather than Reuven, the firstborn, assuming the role of head of household, that role will be handed to Yosef. When Yosef finally revealed his identity to his brothers, he was somewhat concerned about the psychological fallout and the future relationship that he would have with them. For this reason, he set about explaining the cycle of events as he understood them. He informs his brothers that from his perspective, that both they and he were playing their parts in a narrative that was choreographed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with an agenda that went well beyond the petty rivalries and siblings between himself and the brothers. He interpreted the events on the micro level. We can view these events on the macro level. On the micro level, God's intent was to provide them with the means for survival during the famine that was by then well underway. On the macro level, however, there was an even broader agenda, which was to get the future Bnei Yisrael into Egypt and to begin the 210 years of Galut as part of the Brit Ben Habatarim and the ultimate goal of Matan Torah. Before sending the brothers back to his father with the information that he is still alive and well, he tells his brothers, V'yata al ta'atzavu, do not feel worried, nor feel guilty over the fact that you have sold me, because, you were merely acting out God's wishes, that lemichye shalachani Elokim lefnechem. When ultimately the family relocates to Egypt, God has arranged that there will be the means for the family to survive. And Yosef repeats this thought in Pasuk 7. V'yishlacheni Elokim lefnechem. God was the one who sent me ahead of you in order to keep you alive during the famine. In effect, he was telling them that both he and they were playing their parts in a sequence of events choreographed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Unfortunately, this involved pain, suffering, and hurt, along with some wrongdoing, to and on the part of many individuals. Herein lies the resolution to the tension between Hashgacha Pratit and Bechira Chavshit. While Yosef could interpret the events on the basis of Hashgacha Pratit, it would be ludicrous to argue that the brothers were permitted, or in fact obligated, to facilitate the sale of Yosef in order to fulfill the visions and the dreams, and for the fulfillment of the punishment due to their father Yaakov. The difference between Yosef and the brothers is that Yosef was an innocent bystander to events that were totally out of his control. The brothers, on the other hand, were the perpetrators of those events. They had Bechira Chavshit, and while in hindsight they played a part in the unfolding of a Hashgacha Pratit situation, they are nevertheless held accountable for their active participation in activities that were basically immoral. Similarly, Yosef would not have the right to actively involve himself in being the vehicle through which the 22-year punishment to Yaakov for his lack of kibbud av v'em was to be implemented. In hindsight, Yaakov could apply the events of Yosef to a MIDAH K'neged MIDAH Hashgacha Pratit sequence of events. Yosef, on the other hand, had Bechira Chavshit and cannot be the individual to cause ill will to another on the basis that he was merely fulfilling the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rashi's interpretation and justification for the 22 years is looking at things from the standpoint of the narrator of the Chumash. From that standpoint, and from the standpoint of Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi can introduce the concept of Hashgacha Pratit, MIDAH K'neged MIDAH, to explain the 22 years of Yosef's absence. Yosef, on the other hand, being the active participant and the cause of the anguish, could not justify not informing his father in order to facilitate the atonement for the 22 years that his father did not fulfill the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em. Which brings us back to the original question. On what basis did Yosef undertake not to inform his father of his whereabouts once he had the opportunity to do so?